By the way, you're getting a completely unbiased interview session here because I don't actually follow football. I'm more of a basketball guy. So I've
Okay,
got
cool.
I've got no biases, or except the Manchester thing. I'm very thankful that you helped put Manchester United on the map, man.
No, I just continue traditions of winning. That's
There
all
you
I've done.
go. Okay, it looks like we're ready to begin. I think we've got probably enough people in the chat now. So hello everyone, and welcome to a special exclusive session today with the main man himself, Rio Ferdinand. Rio is a legend in the soccer world, football world, that's what we call it, football. One of the world's most elite soccer players, and Wakelet started in Manchester. He played most of his career at Manchester United, so we've got that nice hometown link as well. And this is one of the sessions that I was most excited for because we like to do things, as you probably noticed, a little bit different at Wakelet. So we thought it'd be really cool to introduce you, the community, to Rio, and Rio to the Wakelet community. So you guys can hear some different perspectives and voices and ideas from significant people that are outside the EdTech world. Sometimes it's all about trying to get out of your bubble and find new information and new ideas from people who may not be in your orbit. So that's what this is all about. It's going to be a free-flowing conversation. I'm going to talk about a number of things, including teamwork, family life, setting goals, handling high-pressure situations, all that type of stuff. Things that we can all relate to, whether you're an elite athlete or an elite educator. So without further ado, Rio, please introduce yourself, man. Tell us a little bit about the things you've done, the things you're doing, and how you discovered Wakelet as well.
Hi guys, first of all I want to say hi to everyone who's joined from all over the world. I've seen like some crazy destinations, places I want to get to one day, who are tuning in, so yeah, thanks for coming along. Yeah, I'm Rio Ferdinand, an ex-professional football player, soccer to some people. I played for Manchester United in England, was fairly successful in terms of winning titles throughout my career. And was part of a team that went and done some really, really good, great stuff together under a great manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, probably the best British manager of all time, if not one of the best managers ever in football. And yeah, that was me in a nutshell as a football player. And then sitting in retirement, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, I've got into charity work. I've got my own charity that gets into young children in disadvantaged areas, helps them get qualifications, then to go into different workplaces. And I've partnered up with a lot of big companies, big corporate companies in England, where the children then get an opportunity to present themselves for certain jobs. And a lot of the children that we're talking to have an idea of getting into sport, music, entertainment, etc. But not everybody can be the person that goes out on the pitch or the person that goes out on the stage and sings in front of 50,000 people. But the amount of jobs that sit behind those people that in the industry that they're interested in are huge. And we just open the kids up to them different opportunities and then give them a chance to go and actually put themselves forward, their best foot forward, to get on the ladder to start working and to create a career for themselves. So I do a lot of that. I'm a pundit now on BBC and BT, which BBC is mainly the World Cup and the Euros, and BT is mainly for the Champions League exclusively and the Premier League, among other stuff. I do a lot of stuff with tech startups. I love technology, the digital space. Since retirement, I've been doing a lot of that, getting more information, learning, and raising a family. I've got 3 children. I'm recently married, so we're having a really good time. We've got a dog, a Chihuahua. Not that you want to know that. And we've got 2 other big dogs on the way as well. Any more you want to know?
Oh, I think a lot of people are curious as to our connection. How did you discover Wakelet?
It was crazy because obviously everybody's been hit by the pandemic. The pandemic was kind of taken over the world the last couple of months, and I'm sure all the guys on the actual call, most of the people acknowledge that when you've got children in this situation, you've got to then homeschool, and how daunting that was for us as a family, you could never imagine. It was crazy. And I was just sitting there thinking, I just need some different tools that I can help with my children. And I just came across Wakelet, and a friend introduced me to it, and said to me, check this out. And I went on and had a look at it. I just thought it was so cool. It's a unique idea. It makes sense in all the departments. And my children immediately got it. It wasn't something I had to explain to my children at all and go into real depth. They could navigate themselves through it and actually start creating stuff themselves. And I haven't found many platforms, especially in the UK, with the vision that Wakelet has, and especially speaking to Jamil, the founder, as well, and his team, who I was introduced to by my friend. And I thought, you know what, please, I just need to get involved and start helping in any way, shape I can. And here we are today. So it's been a quick kind of building of a friendship with some of the guys behind the scenes. And to see the passion and what drives these guys behind the scenes is something that was inspiring for me, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's incredible as well, the impact that our community had. I think that when you tweeted out, you know, asking for some of these ed tech tools that you think could help your kids, you know, we had some amazing people in the community just kind of rush and share with you some awesome stuff as well. I know that a lot of them are on this call now today as well. So
I think that's what I really liked as well, was with the interaction, was that again, you put something out, sometimes these type of things, it doesn't resonate with many people, but here I was inundated with so much feedback that it was almost like it was too much for me to cipher through to what was the right thing to my kids, etc. What's exactly what I was pinpointed asking. And it was just, again, that community aspect of it is something I didn't anticipate at the beginning, but falling into it has been a real breath of fresh air.
Amazing. And I know that you do a lot of home trainings as well on your Instagram. I know that they're really cool. Jamil's jumped on a few of those as well, whatever you know. You know, you're obviously doing some incredible things off the pitch and in your career now with your charity work and the impact that you have in communities in the UK and across the world. You had a really long and successful career on the football pitch. I know at one point you were the most expensive defender in the world, which is quite the title to have. What type of skills would you say that you took from your football career into your current career and the things that you're doing right now?
I think being able to handle pressure is a huge thing. I think understanding the situations that you're going into and not playing the occasion. I think in any walk of life, whatever business you're in, whether you're a kid as well, and going into an exam, for example, or going to play a Champions League or a cup final, the moment you start thinking too much about the occasion and, oh, how many people are watching, how much is this going to have an effect on my life, what's the importance of this, how big this is, the moment you start thinking along them lines, you can't perform at your best. You have to try and really normalize the situation as best as you can. The best example for me was I went to the World Cup in Japan. I think I was 19 or 20 years old, and I was playing against Brazil. So before the game, you all stand together in the line. Our team, England, Brazil, who eventually went on to win the tournament with they're the best three players in the world: Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, and Rivaldo, heroes. And I looked along the line, and our national anthem was going on, and my mum was screaming in the stand. I could hear her. How I'd heard her with about 80,000 people, I don't know, but I heard my mum screaming my name. And I just got all emotional because I've been fighting to get to this point in my life at a World Cup against Brazil, the great Brazil, for England. Wow. My mum's there in the crowd and everyone, the family are all there. I just broke down and started getting emotional and tearing up. And after that game, we lost the game 2-1 or 2-0. And I didn't, after the game, I had no impact on the game. I looked back at the game and thought, I didn't even play particularly well. I didn't play bad, but I didn't have any impact on the game. And from that, it was my learning from that game. When I look back, I was like, from this point on, I'll never, ever let the emotions of the game or the event take over me at all. So from that point on, if someone said to me, did you hear that chanting in the stadium when you played at the weekend? I very rarely heard chants in the stadium, as loud as it was, 80, 90,000 people there. Because the moment I heard chants or heard individual shouts in the stadium, I knew I wasn't on my game. And that is the way I approach anything I go into now. So when I'm going into a business meeting, if it's a deal breaker and that meeting's going to be where we get over the line or not, I just try and play that meeting out as the first meeting I'm having with these guys. It's not going to be the one where something gets signed off or gets ticked or green lighted. This is just going to be as like any other occasion that I'm having. And I think it's so important to do that because you lose sight of why you're there. You lose sight of what you're meant to do. there's a structure normally in place in your mind of how this meeting's going to go. But once you get all emotional and start thinking about how big this is, how important it is, you lose all of that structure, kind of goes out the window, nerves, sweaty palms, etc. And it's natural to be like that, but you've got to put things in place not to allow that to happen. And I think a key part of that for me was to talk to myself before. Little triggers in my mind before I go to bed. Go over what I'm doing, remain calm, wake up the same, go over what I'm doing. It takes 30 seconds. And then when you get in there, you relax and always think this is just any other meeting, any other game. It's no different. That was a big thing for me. And it's hard to do that, but you've got to find a way that suits yourself. And really just thinking about breaking it down and looking at the process and getting to where you want to get to within that meeting or within that game or whatever you're going into. Just don't allow that situation to feel or become bigger than what it is.
That's really powerful stuff. The idea of being able to take something that's huge and then you build it up in your mind. And like you said, you have this emotional response to it. But if you take the enormity out of it and then break it down into little things that you can work on, that all become the sum of their parts. I think that's a really powerful tip. And I think it's something that people can take into their lives, regardless of where they work and what they do. That's awesome. So what about the team element, Rio? So like most people work in teams. I'm going to hazard a guess that most of the people in the chat right now in the audience, whether it's a school, a classroom, an office, wherever it might be, they're working in teams. So what elements of teamwork from football, soccer, did you pick up that you feel could also be applied in everyday working life?
Yeah, team is a huge part of my life now. It was huge, obviously, when I played because of being a part of a team sport. But I just believe that as leaders, I was one of the leaders in the dressing room, and throughout a team, you have to treat people as individuals. You can't treat people the same and expect to have the same results throughout. I think everyone has different assets to the way that they work, different strengths, different weaknesses, but you can't be giving everybody the same information and expect everybody to put their best foot forward in that sense. I mean, an example from when I was playing, when the minute, within the 2 minutes period before we used to leave the change room to go out on the pitch, I would go around every single person in the change room, every player, and give them like 3 or 4 words, keywords. Like we had a player called Nani. I'd say assist and goals. He's the guy who provides the chances for the attackers, and he can also score. Assist, goals. Any more than that, he was the type of person I used to think he'd get confused with it. Too much information, doesn't help him. Wayne Rooney, shoot on sight. He liked to sometimes play 30, 40-yard balls. I'm just trying to hone in and say to him, I want goals, shoot on sight. That's it. And I went around the change room with everybody doing that. And I didn't very rarely give the same people the same information. But it was very quick, short and sharp information to get the best out of them, and most importantly, not confusing them. Because I remember when I was a kid, I would go to team meetings and there'd be that much information in that session that I'd come out frazzled. And if somebody would have asked me a question on the meeting, more often than not, I'd probably get it muddled up, wrong, some right, a lot of it wrong, and then a lot of it confused. And I didn't want someone going out into a high pressure situation confused. I hated it. So I tried to be like that, definitely. Making sure that you communicate. I think communication within teams is such a huge thing. I mean, in sport, it's huge. If you're the best teams communicate the best. And my role in the team my main thing was communicating, screaming and shouting at people, not in a derogatory way. It was positive, uplifting, and informative information. And so the players that were immediately around me, especially, I would be saying to them, because I always used to think as well, if I help communicate with these guys, they're going to make my job easier. And I always thought that if I make their job easier for them and they haven't got to run too far, then I've not got to run too far, which is a great thing. But also our team are going to have a much bigger chance of being successful. So doing that as well, but also understanding as well that every single player in your team has a part to play. And it wasn't until I got to Manchester United and I worked out, we were a team that were challenging every year to win. And after the first year, I looked back and I thought, wow, there were a number of players that every game start. Every game, without fail, they're going to be there. So it's 11 aside. There's probably 7 or 8 players that are always there. Few mix around, and there's always like the 4 or 5 guys that just aren't getting changing on the bench. They don't have much impact until you get to about December, January, February, and then you've got a few months left. Then months of January month is when there's quite a few injuries normally, or fatigue sets in. Then the players that haven't really had much impact up until that point, they come to the fore and they have a part to play. They may not be the superstars of the team, but they come in and they play their role, they play their position. And every player, when you look back at the end of the season, when you've been successful, you cannot win without those guys. You can have the best 11 players, superstars, but without them other 6, 7, 8, 9 players that are the squad players playing their role, the superstars don't get the medals. And I never understood that. I never worked that out until I actually got to Manchester United and sat there and analysed how and why we were winning. And it was, the first thought was always, because our striker scores 30 goals a season. Cristiano Ronaldo scores 40 goals. It must be, they help. They're a big part of why we win. But without these guys, we don't get over the line. We don't get the multiple medals. We don't get the consistent year in, year out trophies.
And I suppose the same thing can be applied to any working environment. Is that, everyone's got their strengths, everyone's got their weaknesses.
Sorry to jump in on you there. An important part of it as well is not putting pressure on someone to go out of where their big strengths are. Like, I'm not going to ask our striker to be our best defender. He's not here for that. I'm not going to ask our goalkeeper to try and score a goal. His strengths are not that. I'm asking you to be and excel and be your best at what you're good at. And then the best results come for the team. If we need strength or we need something elsewhere over here, ask the person who you feel is strongest at doing that, or you feel is capable of actually achieving what you're asking. Achievable goals are an absolute must as well. Whether it's football and in the businesses that I'm involved in now, if I'm asking somebody to giving them tasks or targets to hit that are so unachievable, that the way that demotivates people, whether it be sport or any other industry, is crazy. It's mind-boggling when you see it, and I think it's something you see straight away. The life drains out of people when you ask them to you set them a target, and they think straight away, all of a sudden, I can't do that, and the life just comes out of people. And I think that the minute you do that as a leader, as a team player, you lose a big integral part, or a potentially integral part of your team.
So it's identifying the talents and the key strengths in the individual, and then giving them targets based around that, and rather than giving them targets that are going to go over their head, and that immediately as soon as they hear them, they're just like, I can't do this. They just kind of give up. We were having a conversation before. Just before that, actually, I just want to go on that element. As soon as I think about it, because we're working in education so much, I think that element that the point that you made previously to that, every single person playing a role in the team, is super important, because in a school setting there are so many different people, so many different parts of the puzzle. There are school leaders, assistants, dinner attendants, cleaners, all of that, as well as the teachers. And I just love that idea of if one of those cogs comes out, then the rest of the machine can't work really well. So I love that idea. We were talking earlier on, Rio. We had a conversation about the Michael Jordan documentary that came out on Netflix. I loved it as a basketball fan, and again, that pointed to what you were saying. It's like, on that team, on the Chicago Bulls team, they had the scorer, Michael Jordan. They had the rebounder. They've got the point guard, and then I love the idea of Dennis Rodman, right? Who's this crazy, unique character. Phil Jackson, the manager, knows he can't quite control this guy, but he might not be able to make a shot. He might not be able to score. But boy, when he comes to play, and he's going to rebound and he's going to defend. So I know that you mentioned something about like Phil's approach to the game. Do you want to make a comment on that quickly before we jump onto the next question?
No, I think it just reiterates what you were saying. I think that was for me, it was a great documentary first and foremost. If anyone hasn't watched it, I'd advise you to definitely go and watch it. Because it does tell you a lot about teams, and the way, I think Phil Jackson's genius is that he identified players' strengths, again, like we were speaking about before, and he didn't ask them to perform outside of their comfort zone. This is what I expect from you. This is why you're here. Excel in that area. and allow someone else to do what they're doing over here. Jordan, the greatest player ever to play basketball, had to understand to share the ball and give it to other people and allow other people to have responsibility and delegate a little bit. And I think it's a huge part of winning and being successful teams. And again, another part is to go back to my sport. Sir Alex Ferguson, who I mentioned was my manager, possibly one of the best managers ever in any sport. One of his greatest assets was actually delegating, was actually giving responsibility to other people in other areas of the club and saying, here's the remit, this is what I do want from you, you go and run it. And then standing back and then giving them that responsibility, giving them the freedom to go and actually excel in that area. And yes, if they weren't producing what he needed, they would be told in no uncertain terms or changed, after being given time. But allowing people that freedom and that responsibility, I just think it is such an important part, because it then allowed him to concentrate on the finer details of personal relationships with players, allowed him to understand people's home lives. And another great part of it was his humility and his understanding of like family, and that there's no greater tie to someone when you feel that the person who's your leader or one of your teammates in your team understands you, but also understands your family, or has taken an interest in one element of your home life. Like, for instance, my granddad, he's passed away now, but he used to come to my games, and he'd go into the bar after the game and always have a whiskey or brandy, sorry. And he came into the lounge, the manager. He knew my granddad's name. He said, I know you like a brandy, so go to the bar and get yourself a brandy. Just that alone means I'm running through a brick wall for this manager, because there's a care, there's an attention to detail. It's more than just my manager, more than just a team player. There's a care there that I will repay that with my work ethic alone. Never mind everything else that I'm going to try and do for you as a manager. So just the little details, and that's only he can only do that if his mind and his time's freed up by delegating. That's a great asset, I think, that you have.
That's really interesting. It's like investing time in people to make them or to help them and assist them in doing things that go above and beyond what they think they're capable of, just by empathizing with them and having that human connection. We've got a few questions in the chat, but I think that this next question probably kind of answers some of them. So obviously you played on like an absolute elite team, like I think everybody in the world knows Manchester United as an elite sports team. The dynamics are always interesting in teams. I know in the phone call that we had, you mentioned something like you can't have a team full of superstars and expect to win. Is there anything you can say about dealing with the dynamics of a team and the relationships that you have with other players on the team? And on top of that as well, ways that you can, let's say if you don't get along with another team member, let's say if another person on your team, you personally feel like, they're letting the team down. How in the past, and how would you advise other people to kind of deal with that?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, like, listen, I was in a change room where there was big characters and there was people that were multiple winners. But I just feel in teams that people have got to be allowed to make demands of each other. Yes, there's going to be the kind of lieutenants, leaders in these teams, but then there's still got to be that pushback somewhere, and it's got to be allowed for. There's got to be room for that, because I think that's healthy for a team. So, for instance, if I'm in a changing room and I see that somebody's consistently who's not punctual, they're not on time for meetings or for training sometimes, during sessions a bit lethargic, the effort isn't where it should be, even to where they're not really caring about a result in training, as little as it may seem on a day-to-day basis. I was the type of guy that would pull someone about stuff like that. I'd pull them up, I'd be onto them and say, "What are you back?" I would really check people about stuff like that. But I could only do that comfortably, knowing that I had all my eggs in one basket, and all of the things that I was questioning, I was doing right. So, for instance, punctuality or the intensity every day, my application every day. When do I know that's on point and that's right? I can feel comfortable pulling someone about their lack of intensity, etc. So that's a big thing, and our manager allowed for that, wanted that. and we kind of govern the change room like that, myself and one or two others. But it's making sure that you can put demands on players, or teammates, whatever industry you're in, that they understand is part of how your team will be successful, and don't take things to heart. Don't take things as the criticisms that you may get are hopefully constructive. That's not something that you sit and become depressed about. I always wanted, if I criticize someone, I always wanted to see something back, whether it's an immediate clap back verbally, or I'll show you, and the next day or a week I see a change in their habits, or a change in the way that they're doing things. That for me was like, yes, I'm getting the response that I want, and that means, and everything that I'd done revolved around the eventual goal, which was winning. So when I'm saying something to someone, it was all about winning. I think that's why, where if your teammates can see that it's not about you or your ego, or I'm the big boss, or I'm the team leader here. It's about my end game is that we all win and we all be successful, part of the team. And when we are successful, we'll celebrate together. I'm not going to take the credit. We'll take the credit. So the team's everything.
Yeah, I think everyone can relate to that for sure. The ability to take feedback, digest it, and then use it to motivate you as opposed to demotivating you. I think that's probably a skill that I think people need to learn at a younger age, because I think that there's a lot of people who find, and it's natural, I think, to find feedback difficult to take, because we've all got egos, we've all got personalities where we want to be the best, and we want to try and impress people. So when we're told that we need to kind of buck up our ideas and work a little bit harder on something, I think that's a really good point. Just being able to not necessarily internalize that and be sad, but know that, okay, in order for this team to excel, I have to absorb that feedback, understand it, and like you said, leading by example as well. You can only pull people out on the things that they may be doing to let the team down when you're performing well. So I love that point. I really do. And it leads into the next question as well that I wanted to ask you, Rio. You mentioned Alex Ferguson and the type, he's a legendary manager, legendary. And throughout sports, we find these incredible leaders, whether it's the captain of a team, whether it's the manager or the coach. We hear all the positive things about them, but what do you think made Sir Alex a great leader? What do you think makes great leaders in general? And what types of mistakes do you think leaders make when it comes to getting the most out of their teams?
I think what made him great was, I said before, delegating. He done it perfectly. But his desire, remember, he'd been in the job when I got there probably 22, 23 years, okay? So 22, 23 years in any walk of life, in any job, is a long time, especially football in today's way it is now. He'd been there that long. So his desire every day, his dedication every day, and his appetite to win every day was just something that just rubbed off on everybody. So, for instance, he was in before everybody every day. I used to try and get my kids to school in the early club so I could get into the training ground early and be one of the first in 99% of the time. And I'd drive and I think, oh, no one can be in now. His car will be there. We'd all leave training to go. His car, if you're one of the last to go because you're injured or something like that, his car's still there. He's first in, last out all the time. So how can you not dedicate yourself to the cause when he, as a manager, has won everything consistently and been one of the best managers ever, still after 20 odd years, and you can't do it and you're just new in the game? That alone there is the leadership that he showed with just that. And that's leading by example. But a lot of what he'd done was very, very tactile. And again, like he didn't treat us all just as a blanket as a team. It was very individual. There were moments in your life where you needed help, or you needed an arm around the shoulder, or there was some stuff going on in your life that he became aware of. He'd make sure he put you at ease. That had that personal touch, which is vital in a team, because he could lose you for a couple of weeks, a month or so, because your mind's elsewhere. But because of the way he deals with it, as soon as you're back in, you're in full 100 mile an hour mode because of how he's been. And I think a negative in terms of leadership is a lack of communication, a lack of honesty, because I think leaders, if you're lacking honesty, your team see it immediately. if you're not genuine with what your methods and your approach and what you want out of your team, if it's not genuine or come from a genuine place, I think teams see it. They sniff it out very early, very quickly, and lose trust in you. But that communication, for instance, Ferguson was a very good communicator. And if he was having to leave players out of the team, those players will be spoken to the morning of that game at breakfast individually. Listen, son, I'm not going to play you today. This is the reason why, but I need you in 2 weeks to be ready. Keeps you engaged. Whereas I played for managers after that who thought, I don't need to speak to anybody. You're not playing, deal with it. And then those players that weren't playing, that manager found it difficult with them players then during the week and stuff because they're demotivated. They don't feel included. They feel excluded from the group that are winning and or just playing. So it becomes a harder task for that manager to manage the whole squad and keep everybody happy. Where Ferguson, imagine 22, 24 players, all fighting for positions, all massive egos, all think that they should be playing, all international players, and he's having to keep 11 of them players off the pitch and keep them happy and engaged and ready for when they're coming.
We've got a really cool question here from Alex Turk, who asks, I think this is related to the last question we asked, who asks that as a leader in the dressing room, who is experienced in giving feedback, did you receive much feedback from teammates, and how well did you take that considering your status in the team? I think it's a really cool question.
Yeah. I mean, if I could get you the videotapes of me arguing with, especially Wayne Rooney. So I would scream at him in games sometimes because I'd think that he's maybe a bit lethargic at times, or he's trying something that he shouldn't. He should have done something else because I can see it from behind. And probably 95% of the games that we played, we would have some sort of argument in the game. And he would maybe come into me and say, "Rio, do this," and it was automatic. I'd shout back, but it was like I knew that once I shouted at him, I'd have a reaction. And it would normally end up with an assist or a goal. Right. And the same with me, that he's shouting at me. I want my teammates to think Rio's the best. Rio gives us everything. And so when someone shouts at me, I'm seeing that as like, right, I'm going to prove you wrong. Whatever you said, I'm going to make sure after you come and check my hand and go, actually, all right, well done, Rio. So I was always open for criticism. I didn't mind criticism. I liked it. I mean, when I signed for Leeds United, I remember speaking to the chairman at the time, Peter Ridsdale, and I'd gone for like a British record transfer fee, the biggest record fee paid for a defender at the time, so a lot of pressure. And he was talking to me about money. Are we going to pay you this, pay you that? And I was sitting there and I just kind of zoned out. I said, listen, please, with all due respect, can I speak to the manager? And he went, why? We're sorting out the money. I said, the money's okay, I understand, but and then he got the manager on the phone. I said, listen, Mr. O'Leary, just tell me you're going to coach me. Just tell me you're going to be on me all the time. You're going to criticize me. You're going to make sure that I improve as a player. As long as that will get me to come and sign for your football club, because you promised me that. And he said, yeah, promise you. He kept to his word and he did that. But I wasn't, I needed criticism. I needed someone to stoke the fire. And that was the type of person I was.
Yeah, I love that. We've got a comment in the chat from Kamal that says, we remember how teachers made us feel, not what they taught. That building a relationship based on trust is critical. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah, really, really good statement there. Rio, just before we kind of come into the conclusion, there's one question which I think is really interesting. This is a question from Mohammed who asks, he's saying that in his work environment, teachers can be very competitive and that the teams are motivated by things like rivalries and just winning, you know, which is achieved by like defeating other teams. So his question is, how do you feel like you can form and motivate a team that just simply works for like a common goal that isn't necessarily, because I know you mentioned before, it's highly competitive, but just working like I guess framing the challenge that isn't necessarily in a way of like, we're going to defeat the other people, we're going to be super competitive. Any comments on that before we jump into the next question?
Yeah, I believe in competition, healthy competition, but I don't think competition always has to be about against them. Competition can be about competition against myself. Am I improving? Have I improved what I've done from last time? Have I made strides forward? I don't think it necessarily has to be, because that, again, that's a big factor in demotivating people at times, because they feel that I'm not used to competing. I've not grown up in that environment. Not everybody's used to that, or not everybody wants that or embraces that. So there are other ways, and I think a lot of people, especially since I'm retired in different fields that I'm working in, they like to be challenged, but challenged against themselves. So there's none of that embarrassment or fear of having to do that in public or in front of somebody else. It's like, okay, you yourself, can you improve on what you just on your last project that you was involved in? I think that's key. And again, I've got 3 young children, and competition is something that we talk about a lot at home. And I moan about school, like there aren't first, second, and third medals on sports day, and I don't understand that, because in life is a big competition a lot of the time. You're going to win and you're going to lose at things in life. You're going to get a job, you're going to be let down and say, no, you're not going to get this job, or you're going to be relieved of your duties somewhere. In one way or another, you're winning or losing at something. You've got to be able to understand what that feels like at some point. So I feel that's a big part that needs to stay within the curriculum, definitely.
Yeah, the game-like quality of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
One last question, which I think is really interesting from the audience, and then we'll move on to the last couple of questions about some of the other stuff. But Gary asks, and I think it's just a short answer, because it's interesting, because we've got an international community. How did you deal with motivation and feedback in the changing room when there's so many different languages being spoken at once?
There was normally someone in there that could speak multiple languages. Like Quinton Fortune could speak Spanish, so that the Hispanic area, some Spanish guys in there that were speaking obviously the Spanish language. Brazilians, he could speak Portuguese, a little bit broken Portuguese, so he could interpret for us. It was Sebastian Veron. He could interpret what they were saying a lot of the time. But football's such a leveler with language. Once you're out on the pitch, especially, football is the language. So it kind of just works, you know what I mean?
I like that a lot. So moving on now to obviously you're a family man. I think you take a lot of pride in the fact that you've got an awesome family, and you're taking these really cool steps to kind of bring your kids up in an amazing way that I think inspires a lot of parents as well around the world. In terms of like structure, we know we had a conversation about structure and setting realistic targets, how important that is. When it comes to like your kids, how important is the structure, especially now, given that this pandemic has kind of changed the structure of your kids? Can you talk a little bit about what types of ways that's affected your kids that you've seen, and how it may affect the students as well of teachers who may be in the chat?
Yeah, I think that obviously the pandemic's hit everybody, and we've all struggled at the beginning, especially. And I think the first probably 2 to 4 weeks of the lockdown period at home with the children was a real fact-finding process for us, and we kind of worked out that the loss of structure in their lives. You remember, obviously, you guys are from a teaching background, academic background, that kids, they understand, they get up at a particular time, they make their way to school. They get to school, they've got a structure of lessons throughout the day, and then after there's maybe some clubs, home, food, homework, bed. So that's just on repeat. And that was all lost in the first couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, and we were just like working out and what's going on. And we sat down as a family and quickly just said, listen, we need to set some sort of structure within the household. And now, since then, it's run so much smoother. The relationships in the house have blossomed even more. Because you're not at each other's throats through frustration, and the kids were like a bit anxious. There was anxiety growing in the house because there wasn't that structure that they were used to. And I think children thrive off that. They're used to it in their lives. So to take it away so suddenly, I think was very, very and they wasn't prepared for it. Nor was we as adults. And it made the situation like a pressure cooker. And once you brought that structure in of waking up, breakfast, working out as a family, some days, getting your schoolwork ready, doing your schoolwork, after school, going out for a long walk when we were allowed to, doing some fun things in the evening. Once they had that structure in place, the kids, you could see they thrived. They were starting to enjoy life more. They were enjoying the home schooling more. They were enjoying being at home more. And they thrive under that. And I think that once you see the routine is back in their life, the results of what they're doing, their output at school just grew again. So it was definitely from a fact-finding perspective at home, structure is the key word, and routines are the key words in our house.
Yeah, you mentioned on the call that we had last time that you kind of give them tasks to do that aren't necessarily academic, but that instill this idea of having a routine.
Yeah, and like even teamwork. So, for instance, they've got a rota. We made them draw up a rota. So every breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they have to get out all the condiments. They have to get out the plates and the mats and the drinks and stuff, and then put it all away, wash it up, and put it all away. And the first week or so was, we just left them to it, and it was arguments, as you can imagine, who's doing what. You're not meant to be doing that, etc. And they end up working out that if they just talk, communicate, and help each other, they get it done quicker, and it's much more effective the way they do it like that. So we're in a good place now. I don't want to tempt fate, but we're in a good place at the moment.
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. Just before we leave though, Ria, I wanted to address a couple of the issues that the community want to hear about, I think. And I guess you've got that the t-shirt on with those awesome statements on. You mentioned we had a conversation earlier. I keep referring back to it because it was amazing. And you spoke about your experiences with racism when you were young compared to your experiences now. But you spoke a little bit about privilege as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I think that it'd be important for the community as well to hear what your thoughts were on the racism that you faced growing up. Some of the I guess the things that you could do to try and combat that as individuals. And then on top of that, the privilege that you spoke of as well. It'd be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, no, obviously everyone's seeing what's happening at the moment, and it's disheartening to see it all. And what it's done in this time is actually made the young generation. I think they consumed a lot more news and current affairs than they ever would have before in their lives. And that's going to lead obviously to some form of trauma maybe in the future. But I think one thing it will do, hopefully, if they're getting the right information from their parents and the news is backed up by their parents, is they're going to be educated on this topic. And that's what I've tried to do with my children. And I've made them sit through and watch the disgusting video that's been circulated, the guy being killed. Not something I had envisaged myself doing, but I thought it was very important for my children to get an understanding of what society is like, how serious it is out there. And it made me then start thinking about my own youth when I grew up. And I had to explain to my children that they are privileged because of the career that I've had. We are now looked at differently as a family to what my family was looked at when I was younger. So I have to give them little explanations of that as to, for instance, when I was younger, going into a shop, noticing that the shopkeepers automatically were on guard. Their body language was totally different. Once I came in, maybe with a few friends who were of different races, brown skin, and people, the shopkeepers, or sometimes I wouldn't even be able to get into a shop. Security guards on the shop would say, "Sorry, you guys can't come in." Why? No, you can't come in. And I knew that was because of how we looked, our skin color. I used to cross the road sometimes if I was late at night walking and I saw an older lady walking towards me, because I was in fear that she would be in fear, or I would assume that she would feel that she feels threatened. And that's how I was kind of conditioned as a kid to be. And it's draining, it's tiring to deal with that. But I had to make my children aware and understand how that was then. But do not forget that because you are privileged now and you don't feel that. Because it is there are undertones of it. But I go into a restaurant now and the initial response is there's a group of us who are black or brown skin or whatever, mixture of us, some, especially in foreign countries where we travel sometimes, and the backs go up like that to some people and say, wow, and then people may realize and see me who it is, shoulders become relaxed and it's they're okay. So I'm very aware that there are still undertones of racism around, but my children aren't. And I have to make them aware of these situations because it is in our world, it's in our lifetime, and we're asking for it to improve, and the improvements aren't happening quick enough.
Yeah. And speaking of your kids as well, how important do you think that family and friends in your social circle is to your success, and also to working as a team as well?
Yeah, I don't achieve what I achieved in my football career without family. it's a fact. My dad and my mum sacrificed so much in terms of just working multiple jobs, traveling to try and get me from A to B, to training sessions, to games, etc. Instilling certain traits in me that I still have today, like a work ethic, etc. Respect for people. Listen, without my family, that again, I definitely wouldn't have got to the heights that I got to, and I understand that, and that's why I'm trying to instill things like that into my children. I take a big responsibility in trying to make sure that my children have the right things
Yeah.
instilled to succeed.
That leads into a question from Gene, who asks, as a father, how are you instilling teamwork, the elements of teamwork in your kids? Because I know what it was like in my household growing up. It was like every person for themselves. You know, how
Yeah.
is there anything that you can do to help your kids kind of get into that team working mentality?
Yeah, well, I explained before, the rota system we've got for cleaning up and for stuff like that that's teamwork.
Mm,
It doesn't run smoothly, it doesn't run properly without them working together, and they've quickly understood that now, and it runs very, very smoothly. And when they're going on the school bus or whatever, it's about helping each other. My little girl's 9 years old. Sometimes she's got 3 bags and an instrument to take to school. Help. Like,
mm,
don't watch your sister struggle. And they don't mean it, but it's just about being there to give them a little push in the right direction, to make sure that if they see one of them struggling, whether it's a sister or another kid at school, just try and be that little bit of help. And because I always believe that's a nice trait to have whether you're a kid or an adult. I think helping other people and being part of teams is a key part. In my life, really, my whole working life has revolved around being in good teams. And
mm,
so knowing how teams work to achieve what they need to achieve is definitely been a huge part of my life.
mm, mm. I think the stuff that you've shared today has been absolutely incredible, honestly. Like it's so refreshing to hear different perspectives from people who are outside of edtech. And I think that we're just really blessed to have the opportunity to speak with you today about this. The last thing that I want to speak about, it's the last thing because we've got a question here from Cheng. And then we can jump off and I'll give you the last word as well, Rio. But the last question, which I think is important, is this idea of work-life balance. It's like you're a champion multiple times, right? Um, what's your thoughts on that, and how can people achieve it? And how do you deal with people who are super ambitious and people who may not be that ambitious, and deal with that idea of work-life balance?
I think there's different types of people. I don't think there's not a one size fits all answer. I think there's different types of people. There's people that obsess about their work, obsess it's their life, and they want to get to the top of the mountain and they'll never be satisfied. There's another mountain to climb, and then there's another mountain to climb, and they're just obsessive people, and that's their nature. And I think I fall probably into that character, into that area. Whereas I was just obsessed with playing football, obsessed with achieving my certain targets that I set myself. But not everybody has that same type of intensity. And I think it's about, especially leaders of teams and teammates, understanding and appreciating that the next person will have a different outlook on life and they'll
Mm,
value other things more, but doesn't mean that their fight for the cause is any less than yours. It's just they're playing a different role. And I think that's so important to understand and to appreciate within a team environment.
got you. I think that's really enriching advice for everybody. Rio, thank you so much. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I think we've covered so much in this nearly an hour now, and I think that the community, I'm seeing the comments coming in. I think the community absolutely love this. And I
Cool.
really thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule for coming and joining us today. And I thank everybody in the chat as well, everybody who's attended today to hear from Rio. Hopefully this session's helped you see things in a different perspective. And like I said, whether you're an elite athlete or an elite educator, there's things hopefully that we've learned today that we can all take into our lives and start applying and just looking at things in a different perspective. Just very quickly, I'll go through some of the technical stuff. This is recorded, so you will be able to get a copy of it, guys. We'll be sharing it out. Everybody who signed up will get a certificate of attendance, and I do know that some of the certificates are a little bit late to get sent to your email, but we are on it. You will get it, so be patient. You will get all the certificates for the sessions that you've attended. And we'll be sharing this out on social media. Also, any ideas and tips that you've picked up from Rio today, please just share them with us on Twitter at Twitter with the hashtag Wakelet Community Week. And Rio Ferdinand's Twitter handle is on his name by his camera. Rio, before we exit, I want to give you the last word. Do you have any messages to our community that you'd like to give?
No, I just want to say, listen, thank you guys for taking the time out to kind of get involved and listen. I think Wakelet are doing a great job in connecting people from all over the world, in education especially at the moment, and among other things, and just keep making it work. And I think, again, at the end of this, teamwork is of huge importance if you're going to be a success as a business, in education. The teams that are involved in that, I think, again, it's of huge importance to make sure we encourage each other to excel in areas that we're strongest and to keep on learning. So thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Rio. We really appreciate that. Thank you everyone for joining us. What a session. Absolutely incredible.